What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Welcome, my friends, to another chilling edition of a man in his 30s reading scary stories to give himself goosebumps and maybe other people. Or, as it's more popularly known, Weekly Spooky. And that's right, I'm here to give you a dose of scares so you don't have to wait till next October. In fact, right now it's December. And I do want to mention, I'm a humongous fan of the holiday season. Holidays are about togetherness and sharing and all that good stuff. But one of my favorite things about Christmas is that one of the early traditions for Christmas in the United Kingdom is sharing ghost stories. So, we're going to try to give you your fill of ghost stories for the entire month of December right here on Weekly Spooky. And tonight's story is pretty scary and also a bit more ghostly than any of the other stories we've done so far. And I do appreciate if you guys have stuck around, because last week's story, which was a Thanksgiving story, was pretty nasty, and it might have ruined a lot of Thanksgiving appetites. They say that there are three major stressors in life: divorce, the death of a parent, and moving. Now, who says that? Well, they. And who is they? Maybe that's a story we'll tell you another time. But tonight's story is about one of those three. Actually, maybe it's about 2 out of 3. Who's to say? I mean, you're going to have to listen to find out. But a couple has gotten their first home before they get married. And they find there's a history to the home that they were not expecting. A history that may come alive in front of them. I hope you enjoy tonight's story, and as always, afterward, I'll be hanging out a little bit to talk at you. But for now, enjoy the story.
Homecoming by Joe Solmo.
Brandon pulled the keyring from his pocket of the worn blue jeans he wore. Christy danced impatiently from foot to foot behind him in the cold morning air. "Hurry up, Brandon, it's freezing out here," she said as a cloud of her frozen breath escaped her mouth. "First thing we're going to do is have to get these locks changed. This key isn't working right," Brandon said over his shoulder back at his fiancée. "I just hope the heat is turned on. I can't believe you went out and got us a house without letting me see it first," she said and rubbed her arms. "It's more romantic that way. Besides, it's all my money," Brandon said as the key finally did its job and the lock clicked. He swung the door open and turned towards Christy. "Shall I carry you over the threshold?" he asked. "Not until we're married, Bran. Let's just get warm," Christy said and pushed past him. He heard her boots click on the hardwood floors of the living room. "This place is huge," he heard her say from deep within the house. It put a smile on his face that she liked the house he picked out. He entered and closed the door behind him. "How much did you pay for this place, Bran?" she asked as he entered the kitchen behind her. She ran her hands over the granite countertop. It was so smooth. "Now don't you worry about that," he replied and wrapped his arms around her. She squealed and started to giggle. "How can we afford this place?" "I got it all covered. I've been saving up for a while now. If I take some overtime down at the shop every week, we should be just fine. I talked to Sam. He said I could work Saturdays," Brandon said. "It's beautiful." "When do we move in?" she asked. "As soon as we're done here, I got the truck for the whole day," he said back. "This is going to be great. We can start a family," Brandon finished. She smiled back at him and kissed him on the mouth, making a loud smacking noise with her lips when they separated. "Let's go. You know I don't have much at my mom's," she said and skipped towards the front door. Brandon watched her go. It wasn't just to see her backside, although it was quite impressive. It was her youthfulness that really attracted him to her. They had met in high school. He was a senior, but she was only a freshman. They didn't really talk until Christy's mom had to bring her car into the shop Brandon worked at after graduation. They were nearly inseparable ever since. He followed her out the door. Night fell across the town early in the wintertime. It was only 6:30 p.m., but the streetlights have come on already when they pulled up in Sam's borrowed truck full of their possessions. Brandon backed it right up to the front door so they didn't have to walk as far. "Come on, babe, let's get this stuff inside. We need to christen each room, you know," Brandon said, patting Christy on the behind. "Once we get this stuff inside, I'm gonna be too tired," she said, and watched the smile leave Brandon's face. "Well, maybe 2 rooms," she said coyly. They carried the boxes inside and placed them in the rooms which were labeled on them. They didn't have much in the way of furniture. They were using lawn chairs temporarily in the living room. It would take another week or so for Brandon to get enough money to get a couch from one of those rental places. "You know, Bran, I was thinking now that we have our own house, that maybe I should get a job," Christy said as she placed a milk crate down in the living room. Brandon placed the TV on top of it. At least they had a flat screen and not one of those old heavy TVs, he thought to himself. "I'll bring the truck back tomorrow. Why don't we order a pizza and get cleaned up?" Brandon said, kissing his fiancée. "Sounds good to me. I could use a hot shower," Christy said, and headed upstairs. Brandon ordered a pizza quick and followed her up. He could hear the shower running as he entered their bedroom. He started to assemble the wooden frame before he lacked all ambition. He just finished when he heard a knock on the door. He raced downstairs to get the pizza. After they were full, they made their way to the bedroom. He was glad he'd finished putting the bed together. They hopped onto the mattress and started to get undressed. Brandon awoke sometime in the night. He sat up and looked around their bedroom. It was like a dream come true. He turned back to his bride-to-be and smiled. He threw on his pants and headed down to the kitchen to grab himself a drink. He hoped there was a beer or 2 left over. Nothing was as good as a cold beer after sex, he thought. He let out a wahoo when he opened the fridge and saw there was plenty left. He grabbed a bottle and twisted the top off. He took a long pull off the bottle before leaning against the counter, looking over the boxes he had yet to unpack. A chore that he really didn't mind having to do. Being out on their own was worth it, even if they didn't have much. He didn't mind Christy's parents. Well, her foster parents. Even though they'd split up, both of them continued to be a part of her life. She had lived with her foster mother since they divorced 2 years ago. Sometimes Christy would tell him that she wanted to know her real parents, but she had no way of knowing. Her foster parents refused to help her. Brandon heard a thump from upstairs. "Babe?" he called out, but only silence followed. He put his beer down on the counter and moved towards the stairs. He heard no movement upstairs. "Maybe it's just the house settling," he said, and went back to his bottle. A loud thump came from upstairs, this time with a scream. It was not the house settling. He ran to the stairs, but a 6 steps up he froze. Standing at the top of the stairs was a black form. Its eyes glowed red with hatred.
Intrusus,
it said in a guttural voice. Brandon felt his knees give out, and he fell back onto the hard kitchen floor. He slid into the corner of the cabinets. Brandon was paralyzed with fear, but he heard something coming down the stairs, and Christy was screaming. He couldn't turn his head to look. He listened as the noise went through the kitchen to the hall, and then he heard a door open and slam shut. Then there was only silence. It took him another minute before he could move. He got to his feet and called out to Christy, but he heard no reply. He ran into the hall and looked for her. He saw a small blood trail leading to the basement door. He grabbed a flashlight in the living room and headed towards the basement. He placed his hand on the knob and yanked it open, not sure what to expect, but only darkness greeted him. He shone the light on the wooden basement steps. He saw the same blood trail leading down into the abyss. "Christy?" he called out. There was no reply. He took a test step down and waited. For what, he wasn't sure. He continued down into the darkness. He'd never been in the basement before. When he came to look over the house, he had Sam look over the furnace and other things in the basement. His boss knew more about those kinds of things. Now he wished he'd gone down those stairs before. to know what he was walking into. He reached the bottom of the stairs and shone the light around the basement. He followed the trail of blood that led off to the right from the stairs. A moment later, he came to a wooden wall with a door built in with odd symbols marked in black paint on it. Brandon paused and took a deep breath. The hairs on the back of his neck rose, and he felt rooted in place. What if the thing he saw at the top of the stairs was in here? What if it had Christy? He looked around the old wooden shelves for some kind of weapon, although he didn't know what good it would do. Brandon found a crowbar and picked it up with his left hand. He shined the light on the door that led deeper into the basement. The symbols written in black paint there looked foreboding to him. He couldn't place why, but something primordial told him to run. Leave Christy and run. He couldn't leave her, though. She was the only thing that made existence worth it for him. He took a deep breath, trying to gather his resolve and grab the handle of the wooden door. It was hot to the touch, and he yanked his hand back. He used a rag he found to grab it a second time, and yanked it open. Dancing flames met him, the heat off which assaulted him immediately. He saw Christy, surrounded by a ring of fire, her legs bound at her slender ankles and her hands tied behind her back with some kind of leather strap. She was still naked from their foray earlier, her short cropped blonde hair sticking to her face with sweat generated by the heat. "Christy!" he called out and took a step closer. Christy's head snapped towards him. "No, Brandon, stay back," she called out with panic in her voice. A shadow moved off to the left. Brandon barely caught the movement out of the corner of his eye.
Intrusus,
the thing said toward him. "Christy, are you okay?" Brandon said, facing the shadow and sidestepping toward the circle of flame. I'm okay," she said. "Brandon, run! Just run!" she said. "I can't leave you," he said back and watched the shadow move closer. Somehow it was darker than the blackness behind it.
lex debe in sephire,
It said in a hateful voice. "What does it want?" Brandon asked his fiancée. He could feel the heat on his bare back. He was only a few feet from the flames. "I don't know. I don't understand it," she said. "Can you move? If you were free?" Brandon asked.
in regenerans et non cesarant.
The creature said and moved closer to Brandon, taking a swipe at him with a shadowy claw. "Fuck off," he said as he ducked back, the flames nearly licking his flesh. He shone the light from the flashlight on the creature, and it wailed and recoiled back into the recesses of the chamber. Brandon put the flashlight in his mouth, keeping it trained on the last place he saw the creature. He dug into his jeans front pocket. He fumbled for a few seconds. "Where did it go?" Christy called out. Brandon pulled his hand out of his pocket and smiled, with success. He held his pocket knife up in the light from the flames. He looked down at his bare feet inside. This was gonna hurt. He gave one more quick glance around for the creature before leaping over the flames. They burned his feet and the bottom of his jeans, and he bit his tongue to keep the scream inside. He cut the leather holding her hands. Suddenly, the flames died out. The room sank into darkness. "Here," Brandon said, placing the knife in Christy's hands. "Cut yourself loose." He shone the flashlight around the room, the light slowly dying as the battery drained of life. As it dimmed, he saw the red, hateful eyes from the creature in the corner of the room. It was moving side to side, as if brimming with energy, but no way to expel it.
Mortis es pro vobis,
It said, and started to move closer. Brandon dropped the dying light and gripped the crowbar in both hands. "Come on, you son of a bitch," he called out to the darkness. "Brandon, no matter what, I love you," Christy said. The creature screamed in the darkness. And the attack didn't come. "I love you too, Christy," he replied. Once again, the creature screamed. Brandon could just barely make out its shape on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. It took him a minute to understand. He swung the crowbar down across the monster, who was now not much more than just a shadow. The physical form of the creature cried out as Brandon rained down blows with the crowbar, Christy cheering him on. She grabbed the flashlight and tapped it against her arm. The beam lit up the small chamber, and she aimed it at the creature. It screamed and began to smoke from the light. Brandon didn't stop swinging until the muscles in his arms gave out. He collapsed on the floor, exhausted. Christy rushed to his side, tears streaming from her face. She wrapped her arms around him, dropping the flashlight. The light died, and they sat there in the darkness. "What the fuck was that thing?" Brandon asked. "I don't know," Christy replied. Just then, a white light lit up the room from behind them. They both turned towards the light. A ghostly woman stood there in a white dress that flowed around her, as if by a gentle breeze. But there wasn't one. They could see through her form. Her face looked so much like Christy's, it was uncanny. It smiled down at them, then floated closer. That's when they noticed she had no feet. The transparent body was just dissipated at the ankles. Neither of them felt scared. In fact, the incorporeal woman gave off a feeling of peace. It reached out with a ghostly hand. "My Kate," it said in a voice that sounded far away, "you have broken the demon's hold on our family." "Mom?" Kate asked, standing up in front of the ghostly image. "Is it really you?" "Yes, Kate. This was my house. I was raped and I died there on that altar, murdered by the same demon you have just defeated. I didn't have the love in my life that you do." With that, the ghost turned towards Brandon. "Thank you. It was your love for my daughter that saved her, and her family." "No problem," Brandon said, getting to his feet and kicking the demon's body one more time for good measure. "My mother was into the occult in the 60s. She accidentally summoned that demon from the abyss. It haunted her throughout her entire life. She died when I was only 6 years old in a bedroom upstairs, the beast trying to impregnate her to give birth to a child born of both demon and human. A creature of evil that would be born from this world, therefore couldn't be banished from it. A loophole to allow evil in. The demon was too rough on her. It haunted me as well. I fell victim to it. I am so glad you are safe, Christy. Now we can rest in peace, no longer plagued by the demon." Check this out," Brandon said, drawing attention to the corpse on the ground. It began to smolder and turn to ash. "It cannot remain on the physical plane, living or dead," the ghost said. "You have cleansed your world from this evil. I must go. I have been waiting a long time for this," the image of Christy's mom said, and began to rise toward the ceiling. "I love you, daughter. Thank you," it said, and disappeared up through the house. Christy was crying in the now darkness left in the basement. Brandon took her hand, and together they made their way to the stairs and up to the kitchen. He fawned over the wound on her head that was bleeding. He patched her up the best he could and tried to convince her to go to the hospital, but she wasn't interested. "Thank you, Brandon. You mean the world to me," Christy said, and wrapped her arms around him. He smiled and tried to hide the tear in his eyes from her. He was too macho to show that he was crying. "My hero," she said in a sing-song voice, and gave him a peck on the cheek. They both cracked up laughing, not just from her corny joke, but from all the tension of their first night in their new home. A lot of fun. Good setup, by the way. I love the idea of moving into a new place. I know that it's cliche, but Friends, it's cliche for a reason. The reason there are so many stories about moving into a house and not knowing what is there is because it's a real concern that nearly everyone deals with. I think if you're listening to this, you probably, at least once in your life, moved into a new place, and you didn't know what to expect. It's almost a kind of an exercising of anxiety, except instead of being afraid of leaky pipes and old furnaces, which is a legitimate concern and something that can cost a homeowner a lot of money, we worry about ghosts, goblins, demons, and the occult, which of course is much more likely, at least if you're in suburban New Jersey. But I enjoyed that one a lot, and I hope you did too. We're going to try to tell you a lot of creepy ghost stories this month to get you in the mood for December. I love the holidays, and I get obsessed with celebrating in different ways, so we will have a very special episode of Weekly Spooky just for Christmas Eve. But I guess I should talk a little bit about what's going on in my life. I've been promoting like crazy, not only Weekly Spooky, which, we're on our 6th episode. I'm pretty excited about it, but also my television series, which is on Amazon Prime right now, called Boggy Creek, the series. It's a series that prominently features Bigfoot, and honestly, if you need to know more than that, it's probably not for you. But if you get a chance, head over to Amazon and give Boggy Creek the series a watch if you're a Prime subscriber. You don't have to pay a penny extra. I also want to say this episode is brought to you by henflix.com, which is my movie website. I am a filmmaker for a living, and I sell movies at henflix.com, and that is our sponsor because I believe that when you really want to do something, you put your money where your mouth is. So at this juncture in Weekly Spooky, I'm the sponsor, and I'm a proud sponsor. So if you want to check out some DVDs and Blu-rays of films I've done, head yourself over to henflix.com. Also, you can support us on Patreon. All that information is at weeklyspooky.com, and I'm not going to berate you this entire episode by telling you, go to weeklyspooky.com, but you should go to weeklyspooky.com. But anyway, my friends, I think I'm going to get out of here and get ready for a very long, very fun December full of ghosts, monsters, and so much more. So thank you, friends, for joining me. And I'd be ashamed of myself if I didn't mention really quick, our lovely, talented composer, Ray Mattis, was in something a little bit more severe than a fender bender. And he had a rough time. He was in the hospital for a little while, but now he is recovering and will soon be back, if he is not already, to making scary music and fun music for movies, television, and podcasts. So Ray Mattis, please get well soon. We're all thinking about you over here at the Weekly Spooky family. And also big thank you to producer Dan Wilder. So anyway, my friends, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you again for listening, and I will talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.